Arvin was keeping up the good fight, still making transistor radios in the U.S. well into the 1960s. And then what happened? They offshored production, of course, but not in the usual way. They didn't just get an interpreter and get on the phone to Japan and order up somebody else's radios to be emblazoned with their name. No, they designed their radios and were proud of it. This one in particular continued to be offered in Arvin's radio lineup well into the late 1960s. By then, this radio was being made not in America, but in Hong Kong. By whom, you may wonder? Well, we'll look at that Hong Kong version in a minute, but first, let's look at this box. As you can see, Arvin spent almost nothing on boxes. Where the Japanese competition often had satin and felt-lined boxes that flipped open and had satin ribbons, as you've seen in other videos on this channel, Arvin figured 90% of people were going to chuck the box immediately, so why bother? I was lucky enough to find this very rare box. Rare because why would you keep it? That's why so few of these boxes have survived, not because it's anything special. They did make fancier boxes for some models, presumably for retail settings where the radio and box would be on display. This radio was issued as a 61R13 model in this box, but as this sales sheet indicates, it was also issued as a 61R23 model, with battery, earphone, and leather case. All that might have fit in this box, or they might have also offered a larger box. Lots of the radio makers did this, with the larger boxes often bearing names like gift set or gift pack. This little radio was made in Columbus in 1961. Not Columbus, Ohio, but Columbus, Indiana, which was then about 40 miles south of Indianapolis. Where Columbus is now, I have no idea. Arvin had been in the manufacturing business since 1919, making all kinds of things. They began as the Indianapolis Air Pump Company, making automobile tire pumps, then car heaters. Cars didn't come with built-in heaters in the early days. In 1924, they purchased the Dan Patch Novelty Company and got into the toy business. You didn't expect to see a little red wagon in this video, now did you? Arvin got into the radio business in 1933, first with car radios. This makes them quite different from most other radio manufacturers in the U.S. They were not only, or even primarily, an electronics company. I think the central theme of their products, if there was such a thing, was metal rather than electronics. Most of what they did was about metal. In the years following World War II, Arvin branched out into all kinds of household goods, metal dinette sets and lawn furniture, washing machines, fans, heaters, waffle makers, ironing boards, and even televisions. They are well known to radio collectors for their little table model radios from the 1940s in a cabinet, you will notice, of metal. Most of their household products had the Arvin name on them, but the company name itself didn't become Arvin until 1950, when they changed the name that they'd been using, Noblet Sparks, to Arvin Industries. On another note of interest, Arvin was an OEM, original equipment manufacturer, for Sears Roebuck, making radios and TVs for that company, with the Sears brand Silvertone on them. You can see the similarity here in this radio branded Silvertone, but made by, yes, Arvin. Even the box for the Silvertone is very much an Arvin box. Now, here's that other Arvin I was talking about, the model 67R09, in the box it came in, made in Hong Kong. On the box there's something that's crossed out with a red marker. Crossed out by Arvin, I wondered, or the owner? I couldn't resist examining this with a magnifying glass, and I found that what was crossed out were the words battery and earphone inside. As you'll see in a minute, this radio has an unnatural gloss to it. The plastic cabinet, I mean. It reminds me of those nylon cabinets on some Zenith and Channel Master models. It doesn't say it's nylon anywhere, and I really don't think it is. I'd say it had a run-in with Armor All, but it doesn't have the interminable slime that product imparts to everything it touches. It's remarkable that this transistor radio model, designed in 1961, was still being made in 1967. On another continent, no less. Arvin did things a little differently. So if you expected the chassis of this Hong Kong version to be similar to the American, as I did, you'd be disappointed. This chassis has Japanese transistors on it and a Japanese tuning capacitor, and gives every appearance of having been made entirely in the Far East. And you might make another assumption, that this radio was made for Arvin by a Hong Kong company who cloned the cabinet and put their own chassis inside, with Arvin having little input in its production. That's kind of what I thought. The cabinet, I could make myself believe, was possibly made from molds made from a production model radio. But no, Arvin did things differently. This radio was made in Arvin's own plant in Hong Kong, an electronics plant that they had set up after founding Arvin International, Hong Kong, in 1965. The telltale ring around the words Hong Kong indicate a mold revision, since we don't see that ring around the Made in USA on the earlier American-made version. That's an arcane detail. I wrestled with my inner nerd whether or not to even include such an arcane detail. He won. Quoting now, "A handful of beauty, plus top performance is guaranteed from this 6-transistor miniature. Feature for feature, dollar for dollar, no other miniature can approach the power and rich tone offered by this Arvin American-made set." In that whole description, they don't use the word radio even once. They call it a miniature twice, and at the end, a set. The world's largest specialist in the manufacture of quality radios. There's the radio. Arvin changed logos rather frequently. As a business practice, this is generally frowned upon, but Arvin, or their ad agency, had an excellent art department that couldn't help turning out great logos. These were used in the 1950s. With this one, the one used on both the Arvin radios we looked at today, coming along around 1960.